Welcome back to contract questions from clients. And this one, Sam, this is an interesting one that we seem to get. Can we make the non compete radius 50 miles from our office?
So the sort of general answer here is yes, but so when it comes to any sort of restriction on a protective covenant, when typically we're looking at time frames, we're looking at scopes, and we're looking at geographic area, it all comes down to reasonableness. And so you have to look at this and say, is the business interest I'm trying to protect reasonably served by this pretty large radius? And it seems like a simple question, but you have to look kind of at the industry broadly. You need to look at the business specifically, and then really need to look at that employee and that employee's duties. And if you're missing on any of those, you're going to have a hard time sort of saying, "Hey, yes, this is reasonable," because the way this comes becomes an issue is as an employer, you try to enforce this limitation. The employee challenges it, and then the burden is on the employer to say, "Hey, this is why it's reasonable. This is why it doesn't exceed it's not a greater restraint than necessary." So the bottom line becomes, yes, you can have a 50-mile radius if you have a reasonable how and why it protects the business interest and how it relates to this employee. So if you feel comfortable with that position, then yes, you can include it. Otherwise, you may want to reconsider the distance.
Awesome. And Michael, what about some thoughts that you have on this?
Two thoughts. One is that this non-compete law does vary quite a bit state by state. So the answer to this question could vary based on a state law's position. So, for example, in California, the answer would be a hard no because they don't allow non-competes at all in most circumstances. And then the second thing that also deals with geography is considering where you are in the country. So I bet in any circumstance, if you had a 50-mile non-compete in Manhattan, it would be hard to establish what you have to establish, that it was a reasonable restraint on trade, and most likely would not be enforceable under any circumstance. And you go to a rural area, and it's more and more likely that you'll be able to meet that burden that it's a reasonable restraint on trade. And so those are just added elements to kind of work through when you're thinking about you know this specific question.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you can go on probably for another 45 minutes talking about all the other aspects surrounding non competes. But I think, Sam, you hit it right on the head of understanding that it really does depend on the area that you're in, and it also depends on the business you're trying to protect. But Sam, thanks again for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.